Welcome to Ladies Talking Love, Season 3, Episode 22, Sharing Housework. It's Ladies Talking Love, a community of women uncovering more joy and fulfillment in sex as we learn from experts and amazing women like you. Together, let's create a world where women's sexuality is celebrated and understood, beginning with our own. I'm your host, Ariel Finlinson. Let's talk love. Today, we are tackling, I think, one of the hardest aspects of a partnership marriage, but how to figure out sharing housework. And this often feels like a never-ending process to me. It's like, okay, we're doing great. We're making great progress. We're both feeling supported in the things we're working on. And then something changes. And it's just constant. The mental load that a lot of us carry is so heavy, especially as women and mothers. And the societies that we've grown up in have often encouraged that these are women's roles. And so it can be hard to create the partnership marriage that we want, especially in the areas of housework. We've had some great episodes on this. I loved Dr. Julie Hank's episode about invisible labor. Go back and listen to that one if you haven't already. But hopefully today we're going to give you even some more tips and different perspectives that can help you figure out what is going to work for you and your partner in figuring out this really tricky aspect of creating a partnership marriage. Dr. Dave Schramm is an associate professor and family life extension specialist at Utah State University. He serves as the co-host on the Utah Marriage Commission's podcast, Stronger Marriage Connection, and regularly appears on TV. He shares tips and videos on social media and YouTube to help individuals, parents, and couples thrive in their life journeys. From British Columbia to Beijing, China, and from St. Louis to San Diego, Dr. Dave has given over 600 presentations, classes, and workshops to a variety of audiences, including the United Nations and a TEDx talk in Florida. He married his high school sweetheart, Jamie. They have 4 children, and he just might have a slight addiction to peanut M&Ms. The Schramm fam currently lives in North Logan, Utah. Before jumping in, have you ever gone shopping for lingerie and just been online and you're like, I actually don't really want to see these other women dressed up in this lingerie, or kind of maybe feel embarrassed when you're buying it at the store? Well, I have the solution for you. There is a fantastic lingerie online store called Mentionables, and they don't use models. They show the lingerie just on like a sewing model. And so something I love about it is that you can even have your spouse go and look for lingerie, and he doesn't have to worry about checking out from a store holding lingerie for you or looking at other women dressed up in lingerie. So go to mentionables.com, and I have a special discount code. Use the code TALKINGLOVE, TALKINGLOVE, one word, and you will get 10% off. Their lingerie is beautiful and classy. They have all different sizes and styles for different body shapes and sizes. So whether it's an anniversary coming up or a getaway or just for fun, Mentionables is a fantastic place to find something you can feel confident and beautiful in. But without further ado, let's talk love. I'm so excited to welcome Dr. Dave Schramm onto Ladies Talking Love today. Thanks for joining me, Dave.
Oh, I'm so excited, Ariel.
I'm so excited to have you on because you have such a diverse perspective. And for this topic in particular, I wanted to have you on because, first of all, I thought it would be great to have more of a guy's perspective. And you have a researcher background and you're a relationship educator. You're married yourself and have kids, and you've been a religious leader and have counseled with lots of couples. And so I think this topic about sharing housework and childcare, I think you're just going to have a lot of great perspectives. So I'm so grateful to have you on.
Yeah, me too. I think with it, the different kind of roles and the experiences that I've had, I think it's good, to have a guy's perspective on some of this. So I'm looking forward to our discussion.
Especially just recently on Instagram, there were some conversations going on about sharing housework. And
This is such a frustrating topic for a lot of women and can be really hard because a lot of women have kind of grown up in these traditions or cultures where the housework seems to be their job. And so, even if they may have a husband who wants to support them, their husband might not know how because he might have never been taught. Or even if he does, the wife might not feel like she can reach out for support or ask for things because it's been felt like it's her job. What have you seen of that in your experiences?
Yeah, I've seen it. I compare it often with a lot of similar issues. Actually, finances coming into a relationship, expectations around sexual intimacy, for example, that you talk about quite a bit. And I actually did a survey, Ariel, several years ago, a newlywed survey. I was a newlywed myself, and I wanted to find out, what are some of these struggles and issues? And you know what? The top three were time, sex, and money. Actually, division of household task and then that labor of who does what and when and how often was in the top 10. So it's definitely an issue, a struggle that I think that is one of those that's almost under the rug a little bit until you're actually in it. Maybe you're engaged and you're excited about all this, and let's talk about finances, let's talk about expectations. But households kind of division of responsibilities is one of those that doesn't often get brought up as much as some of the others. So I'm glad that we're talking about this.
And I think because it doesn't get brought up as much, like you said, it's really hard to know what to do because you don't know. And it can be so frustrating, especially with women. Like, so many articles will talk about, like, if a guy does more housework, he'll get more sex, all these types of things. And it's, to me, and from what I've learned and studied and thought about, it's just like, it's not really about the housework though. It's about the support. And that's what we're missing, is figuring out this support. And so if husbands are able to lift some of this load, because so many women are just drowning and not knowing what to do and maybe asking for help, but their husband's not pulling through. And so this can be so tricky. So first off, let's just start. What are your thoughts? Should this be, this is maybe a leading question, but I just want to hear your thoughts. Should this be only a women's thing to take care of the house and children?
My answer is absolutely not at all. I think it comes from expectations. Expectations often stem from how we're raised. So it's important to get on the same page and understand that there's not a right or a wrong with this. Okay. So this is more about what we can agree with, our preferences, our kind of personalities, even our styles. Some people are a little bit more messy, but some of this was how we were raised and how we saw maybe our parents and how they handled tasks the traditional way, with the man out there and taking care of anything outside, take care of the lawn, the yard work, and the woman, she needs to be in there and to cook and to clean and do those things. And for some people, it totally works. And as long as they're on the same page, and that's one of my main points today. You can divide it however you like, as long as you're both on the same page. And let me emphasize, both on the same page, not assuming that, hey, you take care of finances, you take care of billing and stuff, and I'll keep the cars running. If one or both is like, I kind of want to discuss this a little bit more, because I would like more out of you here, your help, your perspective, even for you to sit down once a month on finances, for example. That's what my wife and I do, Ariel. She loves kind of I don't want to say control, but she really likes to, she has her system, she has her Quicken, and she gets on probably 5 days a week. I don't know if that's excessive, but she likes to know where every penny is going and when bills are due and how much we spent on this. So she likes to keep track. And then about once or twice a month, we'll sit down and reconcile. I'll get my iPad out and she'll have the laptop out. So that's how we handle the expenses. And that works for us. So as long as couples have a system and a discussion, when I talk about discussion, I'm talking about not in the heat of the moment as well. It's really, really important that I mention that, because you can be like, hey, you know what? I am sick and tired. I'm changing the diapers and I'm giving the babies a bath, and you're sitting there watching Netflix, and it's really frustrating. So yes, bring it up at a time when, okay, maybe the kids are in bed, and say, hey, Gottman calls it this harsh startup versus a soft startup. And so even how you approach the conversation can really determine where that conversation will spin, whether it's going to really grow out of control or whether you can have a meaningful discussion.
I was curious to know. So you talked about your wife does some of the finances and then you meet up. How did that happen? Because I'm sure it didn't just happen right from the beginning. It was a process.
It's kind of funny. Starting out, we had a system. It's called the envelope system. We just learned about, we had this much money and we would go cash my entire check and we would put the check and we had an envelope that said utilities and one that was said rent and groceries and date night. We got to the point where we had about 20 envelopes and we put a little bit of cash in those envelopes. And we loved doing that. We knew where our money was. And then my wife's brother is into finance and he said, oh, you need to get Quicken. And she loved knowing where the cash went. So she loved just knowing and kind of having controlling our money, knowing where she wanted to control where all the money went. So she loved that system. We got Quicken, years ago, and she has just loved it ever since. So for me, it's like, hey, that's great. And I will come in when we need to reconcile and see where things are at. And she can remind me, hey, we only have this much left for utilities or for fun or whatever. But that's really how it was, is that she just loved being able. And then we went through Dave Ramsey. I call it Dave Schramsey. Dave Ramsey, the budgeting thing. And she loved that. So she's always kind of been passionate about money and kind of you controlling money instead of money controlling you.
I love that you bring that up though, because I think that's a huge thing. I heard an educator give an example that you should sit down and write all the things like the mental load you're doing and what your spouse is doing. Like I'm doing laundry, I'm figuring out dishes, I'm figuring out meals, I'm the budget, whatever, taxes, whatever side it's on, and then figure out like, oh, I actually would like to do that. Let's switch that over to me. Because if you're passionate about it, there are things that people might like or things that people don't like, but the other person doesn't mind. And that can be some great switches, but I think you don't realize unless you kind of write it all out and can see and be like, wait, I want to do that one. Send that one my way or whatever. So I'm glad you brought that up.
Yeah, and it really isn't. And part of that is some give and take. If you know that your partner really just absolutely despises dirty dishes or diapers, whatever, like sometimes it's just a gift and be like, I don't like it either, but I know that she really doesn't like it. And so I just love her guts and I'm going to do it because I know that she doesn't like it.
So how would you suggest, say they're in that moment, the heat of the moment's there, the wife will pretend it's the wife is feeling super frustrated. What do you do in that moment? Then when you're super frustrated to then make it to a moment when you're not, to bring that up.
Yeah. You could even say something like, can you help me out right here? There's something on the stove is burning, or, hey, we have some company coming over. Can you help pick this up? I'm in here changing the diaper. So part of it is informing, even though there might be a little frustration, a little bit of edge in the voice, perhaps, and hopefully on his part. And so I hope some men will listen to this as well. Humility and men's ability to accept influence have been shown to be very, 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 very strong predictors of how well the conversation goes and whether my openness to change is really that openness to be influenced. If I can hear it and see it, instead of being reminded every time, it's like anytime I want him to help with anything, I have to like specifically ask or point this out. And that may take some time, especially if he's not used to. I've never cleaned a toilet. I've never changed a baby's diaper. All right. Sometimes it may take some engagement, some teaching, some learning, but I have to mention a huge thing right here. And it comes back to the approach. How this is done, Ariel, changes everything. And so I am not a fan. I call it parenting your partner. When it says condescending tone of you never seem to do, the never, the always, or okay, let me just take over here. Okay, you obviously don't know how to know the temperature of a bathtub for a 2-year-old. Whatever it is, that kind of stings. And so refusing to kind of get into that parenting your partner mode, which is really, really easy to do, either to take over it instead of being patient and talking about it and saying, hey, it gets really frustrating when I'm trying to do multiple things at a time and you're watching Netflix or you're on your phone and you don't even notice what's happening. So I could really use your help right now. And then later, I just want to get on the same page so we can talk about some of this because it seems to be coming up more and more and more. I would feel better about you and our marriage if we could at least just talk about some of these things that are starting to get under my skin.
Well, let's walk through a specific example. You gave some, but this actually happened the other night in our marriage. So we'll just use this because I think it helps to use real life examples. We just put the kids to bed. I was starting to clean up the kitchen and my husband was on his phone. And, that boiling pressure was starting to come up inside me. Like, why am I in the kitchen cleaning and you're sitting on the couch on your phone? So I just asked him, I was like, hey, are you going to be done in a little bit so we can chat while we clean up? Or should I start listening to something? And he's like, I just am finishing this. It'll just be a couple minutes. I'm basically done with the kitchen by the time he's done. So I think this is kind of a common thing that can happen, and not to blame my husband. This isn't to be like my husband's awful, but like these things happen to us still in our relationship. I was feeling kind of resentful. It was starting to build like, why am I cleaning up when you're not? If this is a common thing that's happening, then outside of that, how do you kind of talk to your partner about that? Especially, let's say, take it out of my situation. Maybe this partner has never helped clean up really, and this is a common thing that they're always doing. How do you start this conversation and kind of help walk them through, this is what we need to do to clean up the kitchen if they haven't done it? Because you said you don't want to be a nag, you don't want to parent, but also sometimes there's some teaching that needs to happen.
So it comes back to the approach. And let me back up even one more step. And that is, there will be some times when we'll flip roles for a minute. For example, the other day that I was doing dishes, and it feels like, I'm unloading the dishwasher and I'm loading the dishwasher, and I see my wife on the phone. So similar kind of thing.
Yep, same thing.
Then in my mind, I didn't bring it up because I thought, you know what? She works dang hard and she's doing this and this and this. I think this is a gift. I won't even say anything. I'm not going to. Now it's important that I don't kind of sandbag it and put it back. Okay, this is happening again. So I think that the pattern, the situation's going to, if there's homework or there's a test and they really need to study for some, finals or something's coming up, I'm going to just take over everything. Let me do whatever I can to help you.
Yes.
So situation and context is important. So now let's come back to yours.
I'm so glad you brought that up because it's so true. If they usually are helping out or, there's something big, that's great. We can take it. Yes.
Let's say that it's a pattern. It's a pattern of consistency. And we have to pay attention to the behaviors and then the emotions underneath, because what might often happen is that it creates resentment if I don't bring it up, and I'm creating more resentment. And then, hey, nighttime comes and he wants to be romantic. And all of a sudden, all these memories are like, no way. Yeah.
No way.
Right? The romance starts in the kitchen earlier, this morning, or that held. So yes, how it's brought up is very important. Now, each person listening to this in their own relationship knows that person. So rather than give a prescriptive, a phrase or something, you need to say this in this tone every time. I'm more about a principle. And the principle is one of kindness, of sincere gratitude, even the tone of voice. I call it the 3 T's. If we can watch our temper, our tongue, the words we say, and our tone, totally influences the message. And so simply saying, hey, after dinner, or maybe as we're preparing dinner, whatever the case may be, let's say the dinner is done, he goes and he sits down on his phone, and now you or the woman is cleaning the kitchen, and the kids are kind of, they're in here, they're at my feet, they're kind of getting into things. So I'm trying to do all these things. And I see that, and all of a sudden it's resentment. I think a simple direct ask, and say, hey, babe, can you either come help me in the kitchen with these, or take care of the kids so I can finish things up? Or, hey, I would really love it if you can come in. Specific task, if you can, instead of, why don't you help? That's pretty broad. And immediately that invites defensiveness. I do help. I bust my can for 10 hours a day, that type of a thing. So being very specific and saying, hey, babe, could you wipe off the counters while I load these dishes? And hopefully that's a trigger. Be like, oh, yeah, so sorry that I came up and I help. And then he comes in and helps more. Other men may not get kind of that subtle, and they may need some specifics of, could you, sweep the floor and wipe off the counters and the table while I unload this, and then we can chat. Maybe chatting later about this, especially again, if it's a pattern area, if this is continually coming up. But it starts with us. Us meaning we have to recognize our heart rate is increasing a little bit. I'm getting a little bit frustrated. And why is he being so lazy? So immediately, many of us, our hearts go to battle. We see the other person differently. We see them as an obstacle instead of a person that has hopes and dreams and needs, just as we do. So in the heat of the moment, we have to be very, very aware. And that awareness, it's difficult because frustration will go right at this person, if they would only this, instead of take a breath, and say, okay, man, I'm kind of getting worked up right now. At least even saying that in my mind, taking a pause, and then the ask or the invite to help, usually specific and in a tone that is gentle, it's kind. So anyway, those are a few thoughts.
I love that, especially seeing them kind of as an obstacle instead of a person. And I've been so guilty of that so many times. And a couple of things came to mind that I wanted to share, just thinking about there have been times when I've asked my husband, like, hey, will you take the kids here? I need to finish this thing. And he'll kind of react negatively. And thinking of him as an obstacle, I interpret that to mean like, this is your job. You should be doing this. And when I talk to him about it later, often it's like, I was frustrated because I wasn't helping you and I was taking all this extra time doing this, and when we can talk about it later, often these reactions or these patterns that we take personally, they often don't have anything to do with us. But I know I often interpret it as this is against me and they think this is my job or I'm not doing what I should be doing. As the wife, I should do this. But that's been really interesting to see when I talk to him later. It's like, wow, I had no idea. I thought you were mad at me or whatever.
Yes. I'm glad that you brought that up. I want to just take that just for a second, because I think this is an issue that affects many people. In fact, probably all of us, is how we see the person affects how we treat the person. So we see them as, okay, for example, if we see them as lazy and inconsiderate and not willing to work or out on their phone or whatever all the time, we see them like that, then it's funny that our brains will almost provoke the very behavior that we don't like in that person. Isn't that weird? To give us then evidence, man, they are lazy, or that reaction that they gave, we may see it as frustrated, where they may see it as frustrated with themselves because of the lens through which we view them. And so it really is the bottom of all this. It's called getting our hearts right, making sure that our hearts are in a right place relationally. I call ethical responsiveness, that we respond to the other person, the situation, the awareness. We see what's happening, pause, take a step back out of the frustration for a minute and see that person, and then discuss it. Because the research on this shows most men really want to be helpful, to look for ways, whether it's in the bedroom, right? I want you to be happy. I don't like it when my wife is frustrated with the kids or she's really stressed out. I go to her and I say, hey, honey, what can I do? Just let me know. I don't know. And she may get frustrated, be like, look around, dang it. You know what? All these things. But hey, just let me know. Does laundry need to be folded? Is there something that I can do to take that load off of you?
And what would you say to women? Because that is like that example of your wife, that can be so frustrating to women. It's like, look around, how can you not see this? And kind of when you were talking about, can you come wipe off the table or whatever, that can be so hard. That feels almost like parenting. It's like, I have to babysit you and tell you exactly what to do. So what would you say to women to help with that?
I think it depends on the personality. If the men's personality is very abrasive, like don't even tell me anything to do, if they are humble and open and he's actually asking, hey, man, you look stressed out. What can I help with? Then giving him very specific things is great. Now, if he's wiping the table and you're like, honey, you missed a spot, or don't do that, or don't fold the clothes like that. Do it this way. It's like, whoa, does that really matter in the big picture, right? The law of threes, is it going to matter in 3 minutes? Or 3 days or 3 years from now, how something specifically is done? Their willingness to help out, to contribute to this, then some of those little things can maybe be left aside and forget about some of those specifics. If you're nitpicking about how he's doing something, or load the dishes this way, or getting after him, that can just create frustration or resentment. It's like, man, I can't do anything right. Try to help, and then you're telling me that the dishes go this way instead of that way, or you got to fold the towels this way or that way. So for sometimes women have to say, okay, I need to let go of the control, let go of some of that control, and be willing and say, and recognize any kind of help. I noticed and I appreciate are some golden words that we all need to be better at. When they can come in and help afterwards, be like, so thankful. Thanks for coming in. I didn't have to say anything. And I appreciate, I noticed that you did this. Those are goals, especially for men. It really is, Ariel, that to be told yeah, that I'm competent, that I did something right or was helpful in a situation, that goes a long ways for men.
That's awesome. But it can be so hard because I am totally that person. Sometimes, like, you didn't do it that way. You missed a spot. What? I need to hear that because I also often feel like I was trained to do this. I'm the one who's taken care of the house for what? Why can I not tell you how to do it? Because I think that can be really frustrating for women. I've heard a lot of women say, well, if I let him help, I have to let him do it his way. I feel like there's got to be a middle ground on that. I feel like it can't be for a woman to be like, it has to be done this way. But I also feel like that's not right for a husband to be like, I'm going to do it however I want.
Yeah.
How do you kind of come to a middle ground?
Yeah, some compromise. I think it comes back to, again, the humility, the openness to influence, and how important that issue really, really is. Yeah, there are some things that it's just easier and been taught this way, or I found out that it works better this way if we can do it. And if the other person is open to that and say, oh, that's totally fine. I'll give the example, it may sound silly again, of folding laundry. We fold shirts a certain way several times over and over and over. Okay, kids, gather around. I want you to show, I'm telling you how I want the laundry folded. And for her, it was important to have the laundry folded that way. I learned a different way. But if she wants it that way, then I say, oh, in my mind, it's not that big a deal. So I will do it her way. And I don't even think twice. I'm not resentful or anything about it. Now, what will happen sometimes is that both people have strong preferences about how something should be done or how frequently Saturdays are for cleaning. I was raised, I actually had a toilet aerial that I was responsible for cleaning, and we scrubbed sinks, and I learned how to do mirrors and floors. And I had a bathroom that I took care of, and we did it every Saturday. And so that's kind of how I was raised, is the frequency. So how frequently you do something, how you do it, who does what. These are all really important things to really discuss, openly. I call them even raw spots. Okay. Can we talk about raw spots?
Yes, please.
Anything that is maybe that's tender to touch, easily rubbed, and emotionally deeply painful. And some of these can come back to how I was yelled at, or my parents did this way. How you kind of grew up can create some raw spots, whether I was really controlled and it was mentally or emotionally abusive, maybe in a way. Those can be raw spots that need to be discussed, because when maybe a husband says, you know what, maybe he's not helping or does something because I'm afraid of doing it wrong or getting yelled at or getting in trouble, perhaps because of a raw spot that came up, that maybe is even kind of subconscious, that my parents are power control freaks or clean freaks. I know people who mop their floor every single night. There's no dust, there's no anything, no kids' toys out. That would be hard for, someone to, an expectation, something to live up to that high. So coming back, notice each other's raw spots. If something is really, really important for you, then for the other person to honor that in a way, to honor that and to realize that there's probably a reason that she wants things done this way. And I might not understand the reason, but I can appreciate and be mindful and aware of that and try my best. And yes, I may need reminders. I might need text reminders to pick something up, but if someone is open and willing to learn and to relearn, and I forgot, I'm sorry again that I forgot to do this way, being patient and realizing in the end, I try to teach my kids this, that people are more important than problems. People are more important than problems. The feelings, the how it gets done, the process is more important. That learning, that relationship, rather than the end goal of getting the dishes in the dishwasher. The purpose of the task is to strengthen the relationship, in my mind.
Yeah. And I wanted to go back. You talked about how giving specifics can be helpful if someone is open, but you also said that maybe if someone feels defensive, that wouldn't be a good way. What are some tips you would give to women who maybe are experiencing that, where they're wanting help and they've maybe asked or said, hey, can you do this? And their husband reacts negatively. What would you tell them?
It's a pattern. If it's a consistent, just anytime it's like, man, Dr. Dave, anytime I say anything to them, they get reactive rather than responsive. Or perhaps I'm a big fan of marriage counselors, of therapists, a third perspective, getting someone else to see it. If it's creating this, if it is one of these issues where we just cannot agree. And, I've tried soft startups. I've tried after the kids are in bed saying, hey, can we just talk about a few things, trying to keep the awareness of our heart rate and our emotions, trying to keep those emotions out of it. But if it really is one of those, we're in the trenches and we can't get through some of this, and we feel stuck, a third party to get another perspective is better than holding that resentment. I'm not going to say anything because I know that they'll react and they'll just yell or tell me how hard they've been working and get defensive. That's not a healthy pattern either. And so holding it in or bursting it out, neither of those are helpful. But again, coming back to the soft approach, I would sure appreciate it if this, and giving it a specific, or you can even say, be honest with your feelings. I get really frustrated, honestly, when you're on your phone and I'm trying to get this done. And then saying, what, there are times when the tables are turned and I'm on my phone and I know you get frustrated with that. Maybe we even come up with a rule of no phones at dinner or even after dinner until things are cleaned up, perhaps. And so kind of narrowing down the issue is taking the we instead of the pointing the fingers, because that can create instant defensiveness and reaction rather than responses. And trying to find areas where we can agree. Can we at least both agree tonight that you'll help with the kids, get the kids to bed, because I've got a meeting that I've got to go to? Oh, absolutely, yes. And it may not be the exact way in the bath time. They may get to bed later and they didn't get lotion, whatever it is. But being able to be like, thank you for helping me in this area. Thank you for being patient.
And I know that can be really hard because, like, with bedtime, when my husband would sometimes do bedtime and the kids would get to bed late, I'd feel so frustrated because I'm like, well, I have to deal with the sleepy kids tomorrow. And those things, this is ringing really true, Dave, because it is so hard sometimes as a mom, as a wife, whatever your position, to be like, this is really important to me. And then it's not done that way. How do you work through that with your spouse? Because of course, at the beginning, everyone's learning, but I know sometimes when we've been working through problems, the things that come off really defensive from my husband are actually because he's feeling frustrated with himself. And so just kind of seeing them as a person, I loved that point that you brought up, but also like these things that maybe are important to women, but maybe are going to take some practice for their husband. It can feel so frustrating to feel like you need to keep reminding your spouse. What would you tell women to help them with that? And men, how do you keep working together? Because it's not a one-time thing. Hey, this is how I've done bedtime and this is how it works for me. They're not going to get it right the first time, but I think a lot of us feel nervous to bring it up again. How do you keep that conversation going?
Man, these are great questions. Let me start with the why. I think sometimes when we can understand the why is it such a big deal with the kids? I let them stay up a little bit later and think. And then you just said it, because then I have to deal with them in the morning. And that's frustrating for me. Yeah, you're gone and I'm here with the kids. I can understand the why. Or why do you get so upset? It's not cleaned, or it's been a while since this was taken care of, or dishes. Understanding the why can create then compassion. That can create compassion, seeing things now. Now I'm in your shoes and be like, oh, I see now. Okay, now I'm more likely to do things different when I can understand the why. Okay. And then the second issue you brought up, as far as the repeated, I feel like, why should I just told you this yesterday, I repeated, or this is, we explained about whatever it is that we need to get done, whether the kids or their nighttime routine. It's patience, it's progress, that we're all slow learners. And it's okay for reminders, as long as that reminder is not given in a patronizing way, in this demeaning way, in this contempt way. Is like, oh my gosh, you did it again. How can you not remember? I just told you there's toilet seat or toilet paper or whatever it is. Can you just turn off the water while you're brushing your teeth? Or honey, turn off the light when you come out of the closet or out of the room. How do you not see that light? How do you not flush a toilet? The list, honestly,
we all have things.
It's like, yeah, make the bed or whatever it is, or pick up your pajamas. They're right there. Why can you not? So it can create frustration and resentment. Little reminders. So really a few choices. One, the person can continue to pick up after the person. And they're like, I don't even mind. I'm just going to pick up the clothes and I'm going to put them, I'm going to keep turning off their light. It's not that big a deal. And if that works, that's fine. If it doesn't, it creates resentment. And then it's another teaspoon of resentment. And I'm creating this. Letting that build is not healthy, especially the other person has no idea. Yeah, I didn't know until it's too late. And then it's, I'm so dang tired of you fill in the blank. So it's okay. It's okay for the reminders, for the, hey, we talked about this the other day, or hey, could you even not bringing up how often we've talked about it? Just a simple reminder, say, hey, baby, turn out the light, or hey, will you lock the doors? Remember at nighttime, I saw them this morning, they were still unlocked, whatever that issue is, and be like, oh yeah, sorry about that, or I'll try to remember that, or I'll check on that. So being patient with each other and realizing that this person is not a project, right? That they are your companion through this. And I think humility comes from, we're not perfect either. I don't turn off the lights when I walk out of the room occasionally, or load my dishes in the dishwasher, or whatever the issue is. We have to remember that we're not perfect. We haven't made it yet.
I'm so glad that you brought up the part about compassion, because we actually just had a discussion about this when we were on our getaway recently, and we were talking about housework, because this is something that we struggle with to figure out a balance, and it's ever changing. It's really tricky when you come from different backgrounds. And so we were talking about some of the housework, and I was talking about how it's really important to get the dishes clean before we go to bed, because then they're ready in the morning for when the kids need breakfast. And it was just this moment for my husband of like, sometimes he doesn't see that because he's not the one who has to wash the dishes quick to give them breakfast or whatever. And so it was this moment, I think, of compassion of, oh, the why. This is why this is important. And I didn't put it on my priority list high because it doesn't affect me. But I think that's why we need to communicate that together and talk about why this is important to me and why I want this to maybe happen at a certain time.
Yeah, the more we can create understanding, if I can understand your world, the way that you think, and some of the whys behind some of the tasks, in my mind, I'm much more likely to jump in and to help, or to try to remember, or set reminders, or be like, okay, before I go to bed tonight, our door's locked, lights are out, dishwashers, just kind of going through a little mental checklist, because habits, honestly, they take a while. They take a while to form. Bad habits as well, we get into those ruts and routines as well, of not doing something or doing something this way, because the brain craves predictability, stability, routines. And so right off the bat, couples can get into healthy routines. That's great. Many of us have been years and we just kind of let things slide. We just kind of just naturally do our things, even though it's not the way that we would like. So now they're listening to this and they're thinking, oh man, how am I going to bring all of this up to my partner? Subtle ways. First, ask yourself, do I need to bring this up? Focus on the 80-20 rule. If you heard the 80-20 rule that Gottman talks about, we love and appreciate about 80% of our partner, and there's about 20% that bugs us, the way that they do things or if they don't help out. And what happens in many relationships is we start to focus on the things we wish were different, the things that I wish my partner would do differently or help around the house, rather than the 80% we really, really love and appreciate. Something interesting happens with this research, actually, Ariel, is about 70% of that 20%, Gottman says, that stuff's not going to change. It's our personality. It's kind of who we are. It's the way that we're kind of wired to do things. But about 30% of that 20% we don't like can change. But he said how it changes is by not focusing on it, by focusing on the good stuff. And that 30% kind of comes back as a gift, as I'm going to trim my nails, or I'm going to do this way, or whatever it is that bugs you. I'm going to give it back because I know that it means so much to you and you've stopped harassing me about it. I'm going to come back and I'm going to do that. So we do kind of have to focus on the great stuff, manage the manageable, right? The solvable issues, some of that gridlock that couples get into, whether it's housework or anything else. So much of it is approach and saying, you know what, if we have a solid foundation, our friendship, and we are solid there, that all this really, it's much more likely to go better and how we want it to go.
And how this is another thing that will come up often. So we've had the discussion, we've talked about housework. My husband said, okay, I'm going to do this thing. This will be mine. And they don't do it. And so we've talked a little bit about that. It's okay to kind of remind, but then I think a lot of us women are on the side of like, well, I'm going to be nagging if I remind them. How do you work through some of that with like your husband's committed? This is my job. I'm doing it and it's not getting done.
Yeah, there's a couple of approaches. You can take a humorous approach And you could leave a little sticky note, whether it's on the table and it's like, please clean me, or by 6 p.m., something like that, that's subtle. And that, again, person and the personality, or thing on the mirror that says, hey, don't forget to do kind of that subtle approach. Another approach is having a weekly meeting. I know some couples who have just kind of a weekly sit down. How are things? I know we kind of got into it a little bit and about who does what, focusing, starting off always with the good and say, I feel like, things are much better. I did notice, a couple of times that this wasn't done, or there was a reminder about this and that. I think as we continue to work together on these things, another approach, Ariel, is actually just asking the person when you're calm and saying, what about when there are things that go undone? So you're going to work on this, I'm going to work on this. What's the best approach when something's not done? And so I don't nag you. Is there something that you would prefer? Would you like a sticky note? Would you like a text? Would you like me to simply say, oh, hey, Anna, can you remember to load your dishes after you're done? And be like, oh, yes, thanks for the reminder. Instead of constantly complaining and criticizing, be open. Just ask them. Simply ask the person, what would you prefer? And give them a few little things. You want me to a verbal a reminder? I don't want to, babysit you or parent you or anything, but these things really do have to get done. And I noticed that this one, the bills or whatever weren't mailed off. Any of these issues, ask them, what would you prefer?
And that can be tricky because the mental load, then it still feels like, okay, this person's taking the job, but I'm still carrying the mental load. So have you seen with these kind of reminders, because like we said, like a habit takes time to form. And as we're passing some of these things off, it might take some time. Have you seen in couples you've worked with in your own marriage that as these reminders kind of happen, it eventually switches to be completely on the other person?
It does take time, and how much time, it really depends on the person and their relationship. I mean, I can give you an example. My wife, I take care of the yard. I don't mind. I love that. Now our son mows the yard, but she liked to trim. She doesn't, all the edges that are next to the longer grass around the trees and around the edges of the house and the things. So it's not complete until that is done. So I have kind of cemented that, but it's taken some time, cemented it in my brain. And there was one night when I wasn't home, my son mowed the lawn. So the next day I saw, those things. And for me, it was a little signal like, oh man. And then I actually tell my wife, I'm like, honey, I'm going to get to that. I noticed those things as well, just because maybe I didn't want that reminder, or to say, hey, I'm aware of those things. And in some cases, the husband, the person may be aware of that. They just haven't gotten around to it yet. Subtle reminders, slight reminders, but you're right. It shouldn't be the wife or one partner's, you do this, but now I have to make sure that you do this.
I have to remind you and do that, because that's that's the last thing we want.
Yeah, it is. So, I mean, honestly, it takes time. It takes patience. It takes effort. And then maybe a weekly meeting to get together. And did you notice, or how did this go this week? Or man, I just can't get to that. I keep forgetting to do that. Maybe I'll set reminders on my phone or something else that can help that person.
And I think for us, it's been really good thinking about the reminders. So about a couple of years ago, I was in that spot that I think a lot of women can get to. Like the resentment had built up a ton. I was feeling completely overwhelmed. I was feeling like, okay, my husband works during the day and then he gets to take breaks, but I need to keep doing all this stuff. And it was just a really, really rough spot. But I also didn't feel like I could ask more of him because it was my job. I need, just all these tricky things happening. And I was in a really rough mental spot. Like, I think I was getting close to like a breakdown, and we had this chat, and Kyle said, he's like, okay, I'm going to start doing the laundry. And it was one thing in our household, but it just lifted so much off of me. And so as we've moved from that, there have been times when he's kind of gotten off the bandwagon, and then we talk about it and he gets back on, but it's been improving. And even for me, it doesn't feel as frustrating as I think sometimes talking about this may feel for some women like, wait, why would I have to remind him? But honestly, it hasn't been very frustrating because I've seen that he wants to take that load off. And he often does remember, especially because it affects him, which I think can be a helpful thing to maybe find things that affect each, like if laundry is going to affect that person, they're going to probably be more likely to notice it as well. And so it's just been a good thing to see that even though it hasn't been perfect, it hasn't immediately changed, that he does the laundry 100% of the time, all the time. It's been a process, but it's changed the housework and the relationship a lot more. And there have been times for me when it's like, wow, we're behind on laundry and I want to help him. So I'm going to do this, instead of before it was just complete resentment because I was always the one doing the laundry and the dishes and all these things. So I think that's been a good journey for us, that we can continue the conversation. And I know different couples are going to have different things that work for them, but just kind of continuing that conversation and not expecting perfection after one talk of saying, this is what's going to change, just kind of being patient with each other and continuing that journey.
Yeah, it's a continued conversation. I like and notice what you said. It lifted, he did something physically and mentally, right? Physically, he did the laundry, but mentally, what it did for you was take some of that just mental, the stress and maybe the anxiety, the resentment, the frustration, some of that from you. And so being able to let some of that go, because women, mainly women, have a lot, all the things that they have to do. And it's this mental, they keep it all right here. Whereas I'll say most men don't have that constantly on their mind about, what's for dinner and kids, getting them to bed, and laundry and cleaning and cooking and grocery shopping and all these other things, and PTA meetings are not constantly right here. And so maybe it's work or something else or whatever it is. So both of us, I think we have to be able to be understanding of each other, that this is not even on maybe his radar. And maybe this aspect of our relationship is not on her radar. So being able to be patient and say, hey, we work differently. We're different personalities. We're going to be patient through this. And some reminders. It's a reminder. And not getting frustrated, be like, why should I have to, why should I? I think the more that we turn inward and be like, why do I, instead of turn outward, recognize some solutions to this. And sometimes, Ariel, we have to get creative. I'll tell you about 2 creative solutions that we decided we just have to do. One was when we were just starting out, we had 4 kids under 6, right? They were 6, 4, 2, and a newborn. It was crazy. My wife was feeling really overwhelmed. So for us, we talked about getting a cleaning lady, and we did. We got a cleaning lady that it was so worth the mental effort, the money that we had to pay her to come once a month, or she came like twice a month, and she did certain tasks. It was like the best, most well spent money. Another one was maybe a Roomba or a gadget or something that helps the work get done easier, faster, automatic toilet bowl cleaners. There's so many gadgets now. So getting creative and saying, wow, this is causing so much of this. Let's set aside, $50, $100, whatever it is. There's a pot of money if people can afford it, if it's realistic. But sometimes that is, and for us, we don't have one now. And it was maybe for a period of 2 years. That was like such an investment in our marriage. We looked at it that ways. That this person comes and cleans and does all this stuff. And my wife felt better. I felt better. And it worked. So sometimes you have to think outside the box to help some of it.
I really like that. With me being in school, we've done that too. And that's been life-changing because of course there's still the little things you're doing all the time, messes and stuff, but to have someone come and clean my toilet is, yeah. And I love that, just finding kind of inventive ways, even just like a teenager, have them come help you, whatever, be inventive of what's going to work. Because this is such a hard topic, and this affects women's sexuality so much because of the stress that can be put on us with this. And I know that so many women, I feel like we carry it and we don't realize that it doesn't have to be carried by us. I don't know if you remember this, but you were telling me something that, especially thinking of like women's sexual desire and wanting to be intimate with their wife, that men have really told you and talked with you that they want their wife to tell them what they need. Can you tell us a little more about that? Talk to the women. What do their husbands want them to know?
Yeah, first off, men do. They want women, when it comes to sexual relationship, they want the wife, the woman to be happy, to be satisfied, to be pleased, to have those wants and desires and needs. If I can help that, I have to know about it. Some of this coaching is you got to let me know what feels good, what doesn't feel good, and when, and all of that leading up to it. Now, be careful with men. Men, I don't think should ever, if I do housework, if I just did this, then I expect, that I'll have sex tonight. None of that little, I'm not a big fan of that social exchange, kind of what we thought. If I do this, then you
No,
give me
no.
this at night. So I just want to get that out of the way. That's very, very harmful to even have that in my head. But I did this and this and this all day long. Now you can do this. Yeah, that doesn't help the
No.
relationship at all. You probably talk about that on other issues as far as kind of that expectation, or if I help with this area. But it is, men need to be guided. They need to be helped, maybe even physically guided, or my hand, touch here, and I like this and prefer this. But to be talking and communicating, sometimes it's afterwards, or sometimes, right in the middle of a little signal of what it is. Nothing that's going to embarrass me or anything, but something subtle that we can talk about beforehand about each other and what I like and don't like. That it's communication. It's being able to be open. And it's, when it comes to sexual relationship, it's really tough for many men to feel like I'm communicating, because it should just happen. And then afterwards is like, oh man, I'm not a good lover. Or I didn't do this, or you didn't have an orgasm, so now it's my fault, or I went too fast, or all these things that need to be communicated. Patience. It's a process, again, that we're learning and growing together, rather than just being frustrated or feel like I shouldn't have to tell him what to do. Please, from a men's perspective, please tell us. Please tell me, because I want this to be so enjoyable for me. That's actually a turn on for men, is to be able to say, wow, I'm pleased and that feels really good, and do that. We want to do that. So, but you have to let us know.
Yeah. And I feel like you even mentioned that too, like even before the sexual encounter, the men want to know what their wife needs, like the housework and the helping out, to get her to a spot where she feels like she can be sexually intimate. Because I think so many women are like, I don't have sexual desire. And it's like, no, you do. But there's just so much pressure right now, and so many other things that I think we need to let the men in our lives know. Because I think that's something that I found. There's so many good men, good husbands, but I think as women, we don't let them know what we need. And I think that's a big thing I want to take away from this interview is talk to our husbands.
Yes.
Figure this out.
Communicate. But you know what? Maybe not talk about it when, okay, now we're getting ready and we know that we're going to have sex that night. Not talking about any kind of the stress or the kids or the work or the reminders or anything in that moment, because it's like, whoa, whoa, whoa. And that could be hard for many women, but they have to kind of all right, mentally, I need to go to a different place. And right now, focus is on you and on me,
Yeah.
and us, instead of, I'm frustrated with this earlier today or whatever it is. But that could be tough, I know, for women to kind of let that go and be present in the moment without letting the mind wander.
Yeah. But I think with that pressure off, women can allow themselves to get into a good spot, which is so good. This has been awesome. Dave, can you kind of summarize for us a little bit? Going back, what are some of the top things you would tell couples as they're starting to work on dividing housework and feeling supported?
Yeah, the more you can talk about it upfront when you're calm, talking about that, know each other's histories a little bit, talk about each other's histories, about what you did, how you divided housework growing up, why you did it, how often you did some things, dividing who does what, being able to communicate and get on the same page. Aim for understanding. Understanding can create compassion. Being able to see it from another person's perspective, watching your temper, your tongue, and your tone, and realizing that simple little reminders can be helpful. Just ask, how would you like a reminder? A humorous one, a text, a little sticky note, something in there as you're discussing those. And in the end, please remember that people are more important than problems.
Awesome. Thank you so much for joining me today.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me, Ariel.
I loved in this episode how Dr. Dave focused on seeing our partner as human and seeing the why behind how things may be going or why things are done that way. I loved when he talked about raw spots. I think often things that we struggle with or struggles that are coming up in our relationship can come back to these raw spots. And sometimes we don't even recognize that that's what's causing some of the issues. And so when we can understand what our spouse is going through and where they're coming from, I think it can be so helpful. And just to also share the why of like, why is it important to me that the bathroom is cleaned this way? And then to talk about, is it important Is that something that we need to keep doing? Or is this something that's coming up from my childhood or from the way my parents taught me? But just to figure out why. Or it's like, oh, I do it this way because it actually makes it easier to clean next time. Or, there's so many different things. But when we can talk with our partner and understand the why behind certain things, I think it helps us see our partner in a more human way, and also helps us understand why they might be particular about certain things. I thought it was really insightful and good to think about too, to notice the good that our spouse does. Because yes, there are things in a relationship that we should both be helping with the housework. We should both be helping with the childcare. This is just a fact of being a parent, of being an adult. These are things that we should be doing. But I think it can be really helpful to recognize the things that our partner is doing and to thank them for it, and for them to do the same for us. Sometimes it is invisible labor and it feels like it's just heavy and hard, or that it's maybe not important because it just has to be done. But to notice those things, wow, thanks for wiping the table, or thank you for organizing the kids' clothes, or thank you for putting the dishes away. I think it can just be so helpful to recognize how our partner is contributing and supporting us and our family, and to call it out and say thank you and let them know how much we appreciate them and what they do. And even though there isn't a one size fits all for how to manage housework and how to split it so that it works for us and our relationship, and so we both feel supported and seen, I think that it's so helpful to bring in these different perspectives so that we can figure out what's going to work for us. And one thing that I feel like Dr. Dave talked about a lot is communicating. And that's huge for this topic. We need to communicate what expectations we have. And like Dr. Julie Hanks talked about in episode 14 of season 3, which if you haven't listened, go back and listen to it on invisible labor, talking about what's reasonable. There may be expectations that we have that are unreasonable, but coming to a place where we can both see this is a reasonable way that this needs to be done and this needs to be taken care of. So let's do that, and let's do it in a reasonable way and work together. And I think having both of these perspectives will help you as you're having these conversations with your spouse to figure out what will work for you and your relationship and how you can figure it out together. And that goes for your sexual relationship as well. I love when Dr. Dave was talking about that men in healthy, good relationships, they want their wives to be happy. They want to support. They want to help out. And so I think speaking up and talking about our needs and what we want, what feels good sexually, and also recognizing that our spouse needs us to speak up for what we need and want because they don't always know. And as we work more together, I think we'll learn and we'll get better at knowing, but we both need to speak up to figure it out together. As always, thanks for talking love. Thank you to all of you who listen and join me on this journey, and to our Ladies Talking Love team who make the podcast possible. Thanks to our sound wizard, Kimberly Demers, and our miscellaneous task whiz, Jana Norman.